Okay, well, welcome everybody. I'm really happy to be here uh, providing this presentation to you today from the lovely community of Teslin, Yukon. I'm down here for a few days. I've called the workshop Journey to the Self, and it's uh, a way of taking a look at with journey literally to learn more about ourselves, to take a look at who we are today in the present. And yeah, I'm really glad to have you all joining us today from different parts of North America. And nice to see so many Yukoners here today. Okay, when I was thinking about this presentation, I thought to myself, you know, a baby knows who she is. A baby doesn't question, who am I? What do I think? What do I believe in? Am I good enough? Am I right in this way or wrong? Am I healthy? Am I this or that? As babies, when we're born, we don't second guess it. We just are. We live in the present. We know how to do that without trying. And this is something I think that we lose track of as we get older. As I looked at that picture, I thought to myself, well, this man looks like he knows who he is. He looks so present to me in this image, and he looks like he's all in the relationship with this precious baby. And I looked at his face in the picture and how, you know, there are no lines of worry there. He looks like his nose pressed up against the baby's nose is just smelling that new baby smell, that wonderful smell that some of you, if you have been parents, you will probably remember. And you know, thinking about his heart and the peacefulness that is displayed in that picture, the quiet and the connection between these two people was just a beautiful thing in my mind. And I thought, in that moment, we can imagine that he knows who he is. He's being, he's in the present. And look at this child. What do you, just think to yourself, what does this child see and hear? This child standing on the edge of the ocean. You know, look at his body, look at his arms. Look how he exists in space and time. I can imagine that this child knows what he likes. You know, the way he's leaning back and letting the water splash up onto his body. I can imagine that he knows how he feels and what his facial expression might be if we could see the front of his face. Just to ask yourself, what do you think his face would look like? Would he be smiling? Would he have his eyes wide open? Would they be closed against the salt water? What do you imagine? But he would know, I can imagine, how he feels. And what are his expectations? What's he expecting? What's he expecting from the wave coming in? You know, how much do you think he likes his life at this moment? How do you think he feels about himself? What does this pose represent to you? But to me, it looks like he's the king of the world. It looks like he is totally in himself and the warmth. And I'm just imagining this, of course, but I am imagining that he knows how everything, the sunlight feels on his skin, how the water feels splashing up on him. He's open. His arms are so open to everything coming at him from the physical world and the sunshine and every part of himself. And he does not, again, I'm imagining, but that he doesn't question himself as we do as adults. We start questioning, do we like ourselves? How do we really feel? What's going on around us? How do we make sense of things? But not this boy. He's just in the present, in himself. So how do we know who we are, the self? What is it? How do we know who we are in the world? I think the body knows, the heart knows, the spirit knows. I think, as in the previous picture, the baby is born knowing. The child knows at times. As adults, we know sometimes. And sometimes we lose track of ourselves. We're not sure who we are. We're not sure what we think. We're not sure what we feel. And we don't like what we see, feel, hear, think, etc. Sometimes we don't like ourselves very much. But who we are at our core, the body knows, the heart knows, the spirit knows, if we are able to connect with those things. And I know that the journey to self for some people is more a physical, a journey through the body. And other people, it's a journey through the feelings. And other people, it's a spiritual journey. And to me, it doesn't matter which way we start the journey, that as whole people, we include all the different parts. So the journey to the self. And as I looked for an image in my photographs of a journey to the self, I found a picture of the Yukon quest just starting out on the Yukon River, down in the industrial area. And I thought, wow, that is a journey. I don't know how long the Yukon quest journey is. It's a long journey. It's not a 1,000 miles like the Iditarod, but it is a very long journey. And I thought it was a wonderful image to think about for when we want to get to know ourselves. And why take it? Why would we want to journey to the self? Well, for myself, the first time that I worked with Maria Gamori was at the Haven Institute down on Gabriola Island. And she gave a workshop called Journey to Self. And I, as I was mentioning to some of you earlier, I studied with Maria for over 15 years. And every workshop I attended that she gave, I learned more and more about myself. And the more I learned, the more I came to value myself and appreciate myself as much as I valued and appreciated others. And the more that I understood and accepted myself, the better able I was to accept and value other people as well. So for me, why take the journey? Because I think I felt as I was a kind of in middle age, and I'm 70 now. When I was in my 40s, I think I lost track of myself a little bit as a human being. I knew who I was as a mother, as a worker, as an executive director, as a dean, as a member of the community, as a volunteer. I had all of these um, roles that I played in society. I was a good daughter, I felt. I was a good sister. Um, and, but I felt a little bit lost myself. I wasn't sure who I was um, without being in relation to these other roles. And then I thought, okay, well, why do other people take the journey to themselves? Why would anyone else be interested in it? And I thought, well, sometimes we're not sure of who we are anymore. We followed different roles, and we've been different things to different people. We've been different things to ourselves. I'm sure, I think some people take a journey to the self because they're not sure that they like parts of who they are. I can say that was certainly true for myself, that there were parts of myself that I didn't like very much. I discovered, much to my horror and much to my surprise, in my first workshop with Maria Gamori, that I had a huge part of myself that was judgmental and was always judging everything, especially myself. And I was very hard on myself, and I was hard on other people who I cared about. I had huge expectations of different people in my life and also of myself. And as a counselor and as a manager, I was very accepting of clients and employees and people that I was in a leadership role with or a guiding role with. I didn't have any trouble accepting them and validating them and appreciating them and thinking they were perfect in every way. But the closer somebody was to me personally, or even looking at myself, I had a huge judge part. And actually, Maria Gamori said to me when in the workshop, she said, I would like to do a sculpt with you and put you up on a judge's bench and make you wear a big black robe, so you can just tell everybody what's right and wrong and good and bad. And I was horrified, and I said, no, I'm not like that. And she said, yeah, you are like that. Look how you judge yourself. I can see a few of you laughing. You know Maria, you maybe have seen what she's like. Very perceptive. And I thought about that. And I thought, yes, I do have a part of me that is very judgmental, very hard, especially on myself. Parts of myself that I didn't like, especially that judge part. And I had to learn that my job was to accept that part of myself. And if I wanted to change it, I could change it, but I had to accept it and validate it. It didn't come from being a bad person. It came from wanting a sense of justice and a moral code and wanting a sense of right and wrong and believing in that there was a right way to act and a wrong way to act. And as I looked into my family rules and how I was raised as a child, and I had a beautiful family, of course, like we all do. I had a wonderful set of parents, and as I looked at our beliefs about right and wrong, I know where I got this judge part. I got it from the family that I grew up in, where they were very, things were good or bad, black and white. It was very either or thinking. There weren't shades of gray. So I found that part of myself that I did not like, and I worked to change it because I didn't like it. I accepted it. I understood where it came from. And then I accepted it, and I said, yeah, I do accept it. Sometimes I'm judgmental, and I'm going to work to change that judgment. Whenever I catch myself using it, I'm going to try to do something different. So it's another good reason to take the journey to the self is to find those parts that we wish were different, or we might want to change, and then we can go about changing them if we want to. Sometimes people want to take a journey to themselves because they're not sure what they have to give to themselves. You don't know what you have to give to yourself. Some people feel very depleted. Some people feel they don't have much to give themselves. They're on their last nerve, or they're feeling vulnerable or weak, or that they have got a nearly empty gas tank. So they don't have much to give to themselves. Or to give to others. And I think many people have been at this place in their life when they feel that they barely have enough for themselves, and they don't have much to give. And whether that's love or attention or time or validation or attention. Again, many people who've been parents probably felt that at different times, that they didn't feel like they had any more minute in the day to give to anyone. A lot of us working, we have families, we have community responsibilities. So we get to a place where we feel depleted. And it's another really good time to look at the self and what we've been up to. And sometimes we just want to grow. Sometimes we think, oh yeah, well, this is who I am, but I could learn something different. I could grow, I could evolve, I could, or you find something interesting and you think, oh, well, I'd like to pursue my artistic side, or I'd like to learn another language, or I would like to explore some aspect of the self. Sometimes we want more intimacy in our life, and I think intimacy starts with intimacy with the self. If we, in order to have an intimate relationship with another human being, we have to have an intimate relationship with ourselves. We have to know ourselves in order to share ourselves with someone else. And a lot of times, intimate relationships run into problems, and, you know, marriages end up in divorce, friendships end up in being enemies. There is friction between family members. But most of us long for intimacy in one way or another in our relationships. We want to be known, we want to be seen for who we are, we want to be loved and valued and accepted. And in order to do that, we have to present our real self to another real self. Otherwise, we're meeting on a very superficial level. And we'll look at that a little further along in another slide. So I think the key to intimacy and the kind of relationships that most of us want to have with people, whether it's a romantic partner or friendships or family relationships. We want it at the deep level of who we really are. And I got these ideas jumping in twice, some of them. I don't know how I did that on the PowerPoint. I have to grow in that area and improve myself. They're coming in a few times. So here's a question for you all to think about. Who are you really? And if you think about, you know, yourself and how we usually introduce ourselves, are we our history, our biography? Virginia Satir believed we were comprised of 8 parts. And she saw these 8 parts as connected, like in a mandala. Many of you are very familiar with the mandala as a metaphor, as a symbol of wholeness or completeness. She, and many of us who have had teachings from the medicine wheel have been used to thinking of 4 parts, the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. But Virginia looked at another 8 parts. Oop. So the 8 parts that Virginia saw were physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And she added on these other 4 parts: nutritional, interactional, sensual, and contextual. And she believed that we were, of course, we were our physical body and our beautiful brains and wonderful intellect, our heart, our emotions, our feelings, and our feelings about feelings, and our spiritual dimension, which she saw as she saw that we were all connected, like as if a flame that kind of went from one person to another and connected each of us to a universal spirituality, a universal connection. And we could also lose our way with that and lose our ability to connect. But looking at this one part of ourselves, we can ask ourselves, who are we physically? Who are we mentally? Who are we emotionally? Who are we spiritually? She added on the nutritional component. What do we put into our bodies? And not just physically as in food and drink, but how do we nurture ourselves? How do we feed our spirit? How do we feed our heart? How do we feed our mind as well as our body? So the nutritional component was a very important component. The interactional, how about our interactions with other people? How do we show up in our meetings with other people? Are we present? Are we just skating along on the surface? Are we looking for deep meaning? Are we looking for real connection? And our sensual part, this is what we take in by our 5 or 6 or 7 senses, depending on what you believe. But really the sensual part of ourselves is what we see, hear, smell, taste, feel by touch, the 6th sense, how we sense things that are going around us with not necessarily a tangible sense, but a 6th sense, something that we hunch or we, by our intuition, we can detect. These are all things that, how in touch are we with our senses? When we go for a walk in the forest, are we present? Do we see what's around us? Or are we stuck in our heads with some conflict we've got going on, or some problem we're trying to solve, or something? Are we stuck in a feeling we're worried about something, sad about something? Or are we present and making use of our beautiful senses that we have, that we can use to bring ourselves beauty and joy, and enjoy that, the sensual part of ourselves? And there's the contextual part, and that's the part, the context that we're in. And, you know, that can be, the contextual part can be about where you live. Are you in the city or the country? Are you surrounded by beautiful plants and things that are life-giving? Or are you in a sterile kind of environment where there's no other life? What's the context? Are you in the midst of chaos, or is your life calm? Are you moving? Are you staying put? Are you, like some people in the world right now, in the midst of war in their country? We have more than 20 wars going on in the world. If that's your context, then it changes everything about who you are and how you are in the world. So we have some control over our context many times, but it's an area that's really worth looking into if you want to understand yourself more. Is what's your context? And is there anything about that that you love or you hate, or you want to change, or you want to keep the same as you undertake this journey? So these are the 8 parts. And as you look at that picture of the mandala on the screen, you see how interconnected everything is. And your context might affect your nutrition, and your sensual capacity might affect your emotional state. And everything affects everything. So the mandala is although we represent it in 2 dimensions here, we can represent it in 3 dimensions by sculpting. And it's often a strategy that I use to help people know themselves. If we have working with a group, we can have people sculpt the different 8 parts of the mandala and how they are connected or disconnected from each other, and which ones we give power and which ones we ignore. Again, this is food for thought about who we are really. This is one way that Virginia Satir developed to help us know ourselves better in all our 8 parts. Another metaphor that she used was the iceberg. And I've talked on this program before about the iceberg and how useful a metaphor it is in understanding ourselves. And like the iceberg, there's only a small part of us that is visible above the surface of the water. They say about 5 or 10% of an iceberg is above the water, and the rest of it is all below and hidden to others. So if we're going to, what's above the water is our behavior. So that's what we show in the world, our actions, our words. Sometimes it's even a gesture or a facial expression. We can communicate a lot of behavior through those. And our coping stances, that's how we cope, how we respond in a stressful situation. So those are what are above the waterline and visible to anyone. So if you're paying attention, you can see anyone's behavior. You can see how they're coping. Are they placating? Are they blaming? Are they being a super reasonable judge? Or are they using irrelevance as a way of coping? We can easily see that once we we're familiar with those terms. But below the waterline and invisible to others are these other parts of ourselves that we can, if we take a journey to ourselves, we can come to learn more about what's under the water. Sometimes we don't even see it ourselves, but our feelings, and then our feelings about those feelings, which is a very precious tool that Virginia also developed to understand that we don't just sometimes feel one thing, but we feel a secondary feeling as a result of the first feeling. For example, sometimes if we say we feel envy towards somebody, when one of our close friends has a beautiful, healthy baby, and maybe we had a baby who was not very healthy, we might feel envy. And then when we feel that envy, we right away feel guilt about feeling envious of our friend, or shame because we don't like to feel envious. It's not a feeling that we're proud of. So that's an example of a secondary feeling, a feeling about a feeling. Or we might be embarrassed about something that we've done. And then after we feel embarrassed, we get angry as a way of defending ourselves, protecting ourselves from that feeling, because it's uncomfortable to feel embarrassed. So then the other parts of the iceberg, perceptions, that's what we believe, what we think, and our expectations, what we expect from ourselves, what we expect from others, and what others expect from us. And then there's our deep yearnings, well, that's what we really want. And those are universal yearnings. They're things we want to be loved, we want to be valued, we want to be known, we want to be appreciated and validated. We want to be creative, we want to be free, we want to be appreciated. And underneath all of that is what Virginia called the I am. And some people call it the soul or the spirit. It's what makes me Pat, and what makes Lillian Lillian, and what makes Catherine Catherine, and Brian Brian, and Bonnie Bonnie. You know, we're each unique and precious individuals, and sometimes we lose track of that, who we really are. So we can use the iceberg metaphor to drill down and try to identify what are our feelings, what do we think, what are our judgments, what are our beliefs, and you find out more about ourselves by exploring in these different areas. And what are the other areas? Once we, journey to ourselves and get a clearer sense of ourselves, we can start looking at the boundaries between ourselves and others. And one of the areas where people have a lot of problems in maintaining their wellness and health is in having good boundaries. And boundaries are very useful once we really know who we are and who somebody else is. Where do I end and you begin? We see a lot of people in families are very enmeshed. Sometimes we call it codependency, or people are in each other's business too much. Some people have difficulty separating themselves from others, that everything that happens to one person happens to the other. what are unhealthy boundaries? How do we know when a boundary is being stepped over or a boundary is healthy and unhealthy? And what about when we get into a relationship? Do we change who we are when we're in a relationship? Do we lose track of ourselves? I've seen this many times with clients in counseling, that people get into a relationship and they change. They are afraid to be their true selves. They want to placate the other person. They want to, this happens with couples many times, that they really, if somebody meets somebody that they are interested in, they present themselves as a bit of a fantasy of what they think the other person's fantasy is. And so, you know, you have, say you have a man and a woman that they get interested in each other, and the man puts himself out there as a fantasy of the perfect man. And he shows all of these qualities that he thinks a good man should be, that will really make this woman fall in love with him. And the woman is doing the same thing. She's putting herself out there as this fantasy woman, and sometimes pretending that she likes watching things on TV that the man likes to watch, instead of letting him just do his own thing, and she does what she wants. But we we remove boundaries. We lose track of who we are by placating, by blaming and judging, by using unhealthy coping mechanisms. And then after a while, we don't know who we are anymore in this relationship. And we have to undertake a new journey and find out who we are. And this happens to couples very often. And when they take the journey to themselves, or they realize that they have been acting as these fantasies, when they come down to the ground and are who they really are, they find, oh, well, that was a fake person before, or that wasn't really you. And people separate. That's a common time for people to separate in relationships. They wake up one day, they don't know who they are, they don't know who their partner is. Neither of them have been being their congruent, authentic selves. They've been trying to please the other person so much that they become somebody they're not. I kind of liken it to being like a chameleon. And, you know, myself, I used to think this was an excellent quality for myself, that I could figure out what people needed and give them what they needed almost before they knew they needed it. Try to always anticipate other people's needs and give them what they want, rather than just being myself and liking and valuing myself enough to know that that I was worthy of being appreciated for my true self. Oops, wrong way, sorry. So another of Virginia Satir's key concepts was that she invited us to look at 3 parts of an interaction to consider: yourself, the other person, and the context that you were in. And as she promoted us to become more congruent, to be more authentic, to know yourself better, so that what you presented to the world was your true authentic self, whenever you want it, all the time. And it's not, but there's balance between being yourself, accepting the other as they are, and the context that you're in. And she expressed that balance between all of these things is very important in creating peace. It's not to sacrifice yourself because you're less important than the other person, or the context is not always the most important thing, but that in any interaction, we take into account our own self, the other person or people involved, and the context that we're in. And I mentioned it earlier about the, the context of war. It may be very dangerous for people in a wartime situation to be their authentic self. You may find you have to placate other people in order to survive, in which case it'd be a very good choice. And you may have to put the other person ahead of yourself just in order to survive. A child, for example, who cannot stand up to an abusive parent may have to pretend that the child is somebody they're not in order to survive. They may keep quiet when they see an injustice happening, or they may keep quiet and not speak up their true thoughts and feelings because they may be punished for that. So that's a very wise child who would make that call at the time. But when the context is a safer context and they want to express their true self and have relationships which are not inhibited by power imbalances like that, they may want to say something different. So here's a lot of, I'm going to just checking the time here because I don't want to keep talking forever, but we're getting near the end of the presentation. I'm looking forward to hearing what you all are thinking and feeling as you listen to this, or what questions or thoughts you might have to share. But I don't know, can you read this okay? Is the print big enough? Yeah, okay, good. Because just some signs here of unhealthy boundaries that I want you to consider. Telling all, talking at an intimate level on the first meeting, falling in love with a new acquaintance, falling in love with anyone who reaches out, or being overwhelmed by a person, preoccupied, acting on a first sexual impulse, and being sexual for your partner, not for yourself, going against your values or rights to please others, not noticing when others display inappropriate boundaries, accepting food, gifts, touch, or sex that you don't want, touching a person without asking, taking as much as you can get for the sake of getting, giving as much as you can give for the sake of giving, allowing someone to take as much as they can from you, letting others direct your life, letting others describe your reality, letting others define you, and believing others can anticipate your needs, expecting others to fill your needs automatically. That was something that I always expected when I was married. I expected both husbands I had to know what I needed. They shouldn't have to be told. That's what I believed. I thought everyone thought the same way I did. So I expected them to fill my needs automatically. I learned that the hard way, that that's not the way things are. Falling apart so someone will take care of you, and being a rock in order to take care of somebody else. These are all signs of unhealthy boundaries to think about. And when we might want to or do some of those things, or they're all part of learning about ourselves if we experience any of those unhealthy boundaries, and to take a look at what impact that has on us. And so any kind of abuse that we might experience, physical, emotional, intellectual, social, spiritual, sexual, verbal, alcohol, tobacco, drugs, food, all of these are forms of abuse that we can use on ourselves or on others, or others can use on us. If we, whoops, sorry. Yeah, so these are just some of the, sometimes we learn about ourselves by crossing the line, by crossing a boundary with someone else. We can learn something more about ourselves. Okay. I wanted to just talk a little bit, and then I'm going to show you a little video, and we're near the end, that of called by a philosopher and a writer who I learned about many, many years ago. But he talked about an I-thou encounter. Martin Buber is his name. An I-thou or I-you encounter. And this is about the intimate relationship between two people. So when you have yourself and you are in tune with yourself and know who you are, and so does somebody else, you have the wonderful opportunity for what Martin Buber called an I-thou encounter. And I'm going to show you this, that this encounter creates something he called the between. And it includes mutuality, directness, being present, intensity, ineffability, it's a leap into the experience of the other while simultaneously being transparent, present, and accessible. Okay, now I'm going to just offer you this opportunity to watch a video. It's about 10 minutes long. And it's a wonderful explanation of this concept of two selves connecting. Okay, I hope you enjoy it. Oh. Oh my goodness, it can't open. Okay. Let me try that again. Okay. I'm going to okay, I am not apparently going to show you that video because it will not open. Now I'm on a, no, okay. Okay, I'm going to have to save that for another time and figure out why that's not working. Huh. No. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Okay. Well, let's come to the kind of sort of a summary. That the journey to self is an ongoing process because we change, we grow, we exchange old beliefs for new, we mature, we learn, and we want to be different. And so the journey to self isn't something that happens once and is done. It's something that is ongoing, that we can revisit again and again whenever we want to. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing that for the moment.